All right, welcome everyone. My name is Rebecca Payo. I'm the Director of Mentoring with the Colorado Attorney Mentoring Program, and you have joined the presentation panel discussion, First Generation Attorneys, Challenges and Superpowers. We are offering one general CLE credit. I will put the course ID in the chat towards the end of the panel discussion. Just a few housekeeping items. We will be in webinar mode, so we can't hear or see the attendees. So if you have any technical issues, we won't be able to help you. You could try logging back in if things get stuck, but we can't address any tech issues. And you can put your questions in the chat or the Q&A, and a recording will be available later today on our social media channels. So again, this is First Generation Attorneys, Challenges and Superpowers. And our panel today is Sophia Alvarez. She's the Executive Director of the Colorado Office of Public Guardianship. Amanda Behrens, General Counsel for Blue Cloud Pediatric Surgery Centers, and Marty Champagne, the founder of Champagne Law. And I will turn it over to them to do their own introductions.
Thank you. Good morning or afternoon. Appreciate you giving us the opportunity to be here. I am an attorney. I'm licensed in Nebraska and Colorado. My background is in public interest law. I've served as an attorney at Legal Aid of Nebraska and also in private practice. Because I have that legal aid background, I've done practice in all kinds of law. I think our bios are attached. So I have kind of general practice areas. And I've been involved in guardianship issues since 2016 when I worked at the Nebraska Office of Public Guardianship, and then came here to establish the Office of Public Guardianship here.
Thanks, Sophia.
I'm Amanda Behrens, General Counsel at Blue Cloud Pediatric Surgery Centers. I've been in this role for under a year, so still new to it, but have been in-house for almost my entire professional career, which is now somehow at 14 years. Time flies when you're having fun. I have been in healthcare in-house roles for most of that time as well, so since 2012. So my practice, is everything that in-house attorneys do. Regulatory for healthcare, employment law, litigation, IP, you name it, I've probably had my hands on it to some degree. I spend a lot of time mentoring CU law students and also through camp. So if anybody is looking for a mentor, I'm always happy to get coffee.
Thanks, Amanda.
Sure. My name is Marty Champagne. I practice business and commercial litigations, 100% litigation. I started my own firm about 15 years ago. I've been practicing for 25 years. I moved to Colorado about 10 years ago. And prior to starting my own firm, I worked for a number of firms in commercial and business litigation. And I'm in Florida right now where it's 92 degrees, and I'm looking forward to getting back to Denver.
92 degrees. All right, thank you. Well, let's just dive in. So you've told us, a little bit about your background. What inspired you to become an attorney, and how does this fit into your background as a first-generation attorney?
Sure. Do you want me how do we do this?
Go for
I'll
it.
start. What inspired me to be an attorney is when I was a kid, I was really into studying the presidents. And I noticed that most of the good presidents were lawyers. And so when I was in fourth grade, I wanted to be president. And in fact, when I ran for vice president in seventh grade, I quoted Lyndon Johnson in my speech, which is not many kids even knew who Lyndon Johnson was. So I didn't become president, and I don't want to be president. But I didn't think going to law school or being a lawyer was possible for me. My dad didn't graduate from the 10th grade, and we were on welfare when we grew up, and I was raised by a single mom. And I graduated towards the back of my class in high school, not because I wasn't smart enough to do the work, but I didn't have anybody to guide me, and I was just sort of off the rails. And after I after I graduated from college, I had a few jobs that were not law related in sales, and then I finally applied to law school because I'd always wanted to go, but I didn't think I was qualified to go. And I was on the wait list for the University of Florida, and I got in. I was probably the last person they let in, and I absolutely loved law school, and I love being a lawyer, and that's my story.
So my story is pretty similar to Marty's, although not to ride on his coattails too much. I also am the first college graduate in my family, not to mention first lawyer, obviously. And my family wasn't on welfare, but we were pretty close to it, like right scraping the surface right there. And my mom did raise me as a single mom for quite a bit of my childhood. So we have a lot to talk about over coffee sometime, Marty. But
Yes.
when I was 12, I decided to sit down and really think about what I wanted to do for my profession. And I decided that my biggest goal was to help the biggest number of people that I could. And I figured, okay, how can I do that? You know, I could get into the medical sciences, but I'm quite squeamish, so that's not a go. And so then the other path was the law. And I thought, actually, I don't usually tell people this part of the story, so you guys are getting the inside scoop. I thought I'd end up being a senator because I could, really affect policy change and that kind of thing. And quickly realized that politics are not at all anything I'm interested in and never have been, never will be. And so I changed that and was like, okay, you know what else would be kind of similar would be, excuse me, being a lawyer because I can serve people. I also had the privilege of going through the judicial system as a child in a few custody cases. And so the people who were the rocks for me were the lawyers in all that process. And I remember really looking up to them and admiring how they were the steady person who really helped other people in the process. So with all of that, I, applied for law schools, got in, and then realized I had no idea what it was attorneys actually do, aside from watching Matlock on TV. And so it was quite a learning curve in law school, which I think we're going to kind of get to that topic later on. But that's my background and why I decided to be an attorney.
Thanks, Amanda.
So, my father came from a migrant family. He's one of 7 siblings, and each one of them were born in a different state, which I always found kind of interesting. And they were raised by a single mother. She had multiple jobs. Everyone was kind of on their own. And because of his story, he was actually he calls himself lucky that he was drafted to go into the Vietnam War, which gave him stability. And I was lucky that he ended up actually getting a really good job and doing well, which afforded me good opportunities. And so he was always about giving back and uplifting others. So I did a lot of volunteer work through my parents. We were involved in Texas with the League of United Latin American Citizens. And so even though I had a pretty good upbringing, I always saw others and giving back to my community and could see that others didn't have it as well off as we did, and that we had to advocate for others. And so I didn't have a direct line to law school. My father was always go to law school, go to law school. And of course, as a teenager, I thought I knew better than my father. um, and I actually love science. And so I actually went to undergrad and did my master's in science, and then got a job and realized that I wasn't quite so happy in that. And in the meantime, met an attorney, a Hispanic female attorney, who was like, I really think you should go to law school. And so I kind of looked into it at that time. I was kind of set where I was living and was like, well, I'll apply to law school. If it was meant to be, I'll get in. I couldn't really like take the opportunity to like move somewhere and go to a different law school. And I was accepted. And so I was like, okay, I think I'll do this. My first piece of advice, maybe listen to your parents, because I roundabout. But then, I mean, it was good because I was able to kind of get back to, you know, advocating for vulnerable people, which is what I did during my um, during law school with my clerkship, and that's what I continue to do today, which I think is really kind of what I was meant to do. Um, so that my dad and just wanting to advocate for people and help people who don't have a voice for themselves is kind of why I went to law school and what I do now.
Awesome. That sparked a question, but I'll save it for later because I'll get through the ones that we reviewed first. So, Marty, what challenges have you faced as a first generation attorney?
So it's funny what Amanda says about not meeting a lawyer. I never met a lawyer until I went to law school. And you know, none of my parents' friends were lawyers or anything like that. And in fact, I had a sales job before I went to law school, and one of the people I worked with, her dad was a lawyer, and she said, "Why don't you have lunch with my dad, and he can tell you what it was like." And I never had lunch with him, and I put it off. And the reason I did that was because if I have lunch with this guy's going to know that I am not worthy and qualified, and he's going to say, "What are you doing?" You know, and he's going to laugh at me. So, so when the first time I met a lawyer in person was in law school. I think the challenges, you know, initially were I felt I was outgunned and outmanned, and I didn't belong there. You know, there were people that were sitting next to me that, you know, went to Yale and Princeton undergraduate. I went to a state school in New Hampshire. And these folks had, you know, parents that were doctors and lawyers, and that wasn't me. And I was convinced I was going to fail out that first semester. And I probably studied 40, 50, 60 hours a week. And at the end of the semester, I told my mother, I said, "I'm probably not going to make it through this." And when the grades came out, I was number 9 in my class. So the challenges are this sort of imposter syndrome that I don't belong. But it's really helped me to overwork to make sure that people know I belong. And I sort of feel I belong more than a lot of people do. So,
Yeah, Marty, I think I'm just going to parrot you this whole call is my prediction for how this is going to go. So I had two very similar interactions like that. So I think it was maybe one of the first weeks of school, there was some kind of a mixer at the law school, and they brought in alumni and all these people. And I was, you know, milling about trying to meet people and network, which I had no idea what that concept was prior to those first 2 weeks, and met somebody who was just like, that's very, you know, generous and genuine older attorney. And I was explaining my past, and he goes, "Wow," he's like, "You need somebody to talk to and like explain how the profession works. Give me a call anytime and I'll talk you through it. I'll take you to coffee, whatever." I never called him for the same reason. I didn't know enough. I didn't know what questions I would ask him. I didn't want to appear as naive as I definitely knew that I was. And so I never called him, and I regret that to this day. And then another experience, a year later, I was in the, you know, Colorado law mentoring program. I had a mentor assigned to me, and he was a great attorney, he still is. I went to meet him in his office downtown, which was very intimidating. Just the whole office setup was. And I didn't even know what questions to ask. I had prepared in advance, and I was like, these questions are dumb. Like I don't know this is gonna get me anywhere. I asked them anyway, but I just felt the whole time like I was an imposter, like I wasn't really doing what I should have been doing. Like there were questions I should have been asking that I didn't know to ask. And I think that had I known people who were attorneys already or had family members who were attorneys, I would have been more prepared walking into those kind of meetings.
Um, I want to, I think, have an honest conversation. I think your question was, what challenges have you faced as a first generation attorney? Is that right, Rebecca? Okay,
Yes.
so I'm going to kind of be real about, I agree with the imposter syndrome and all of those things, but I also want to kind of get real with the kind of the microaggressions and the disrespect and those types of things that I've also faced as a first generation attorney, and also as a female attorney, and kind of just like throw that out, because I'm sure some people have kind of felt those things as well. and I know that's going to lead into kind of some of these other things that we've experienced, because I think that goes along with kind of that imposter syndrome, and that you already feel like you don't belong there, and then when you kind of feel these other things from people, that it can kind of add on to that, and build on those those fears maybe that you already have, because you haven't had a lawyer in your family, or you're the first one to go to college, or you're the first one to go to law school, and you already feel like you're way behind. So I think that's when it is important to find mentors, like Amanda and Marty have talked about, and especially mentors that look like you, or have experienced the things that maybe you have or will experience. So I just want to throw that out there. And also, when it comes to law school, or maybe when you're mentoring others, I would also recommend looking maybe closely at the law school culture. Like, I was lucky. I know this is going to sound maybe backwards, but I went to University of Nebraska Lincoln College of Law, and you hear Nebraska, and I'm sure maybe you have some ideas of Nebraska and what that would be like, but they worked really hard to be inclusive to minorities and to females. And while I experienced all the same things that were talked about, because minorities there were only like, I think 10% of each class, they had programs and were very intentional with kind of first generation, not just minorities, but first generation incoming students. And so, I guess if you're mentoring others who are wanting to start law school, I would maybe, look at what do the law schools offer for new students. So, yeah.
Well, you've touched on it. So, how do you see mentoring factoring into your perspective as a first generation attorney? Do you have more to say about that, or?
I think I think I'm such a, like, we owe it to each other and others. Like, I don't, I wouldn't want someone going, like, reinventing the wheel or going through the things if they don't have to. So, I think we owe it to the next generations, and to mentor, and try to make it easier, and, provide the lessons that we've learned. And I think it is hard, though, to find a good fit. Sometimes I think I was looking at the camp website, and someone was, or the annual report that came out, and some of the quotes from the mentees, had mentioned, like, sometimes you're just kind of given a mentor and it doesn't always click, and then it doesn't feel right or work. So just sometimes you gotta feel it out, and try a couple of different mentors till you find one. But I don't know, I think it's really important to do that. I'm sure Amanda and Marty have other comments.
Yeah, I agree with you, Sophia. So I've been mentoring since I was pretty short out of law school. I think it was like I was 4 years out, and I was like, can I please get signed up to be a mentor? Because I want to do everything I can to demystify what it's like to be an attorney for first generation attorneys. And so on all my attorney mentor profiles, that's what I say. Like, prefer first generation attorneys. Everything else is fine, but that's really like where my passion lies, on mentoring. And it's because I remember when I was in law school, when I would think past graduation, it was black. Like, not black, depressing and dark, but like black. I had no idea what it was going to be like on a day-to-day basis. Not work-life balance, like I wanted to have some cushy life, but like, what does it actually look like? How does one navigate it? What is the work situation, right? Like, what does it look like in those mahogany desk offices? And what are the politics like? And so whenever I meet with my mentees, I answer whatever questions they have, of course, and like help them with whatever concerns they're raising. But I always try to bring that too, to say, like, let's talk about what it's actually like. Like I'm going to tell you kind of some of the nitty gritty of what my day looks like, right? The fun parts, the super boring parts that I actually wish weren't part of my job, but they sure are, right? The client dynamics, how all of that works. And I hope that it is as valuable as it would have been to me, which is just to say, like, this is what it looks like. Like, let me build this out in your mind so you can at least picture where you're going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important. I mean, not only to be a mentor, but to be a mentee. I think that's yeah, is that the word mentee? So to be a mentee, to be willing to accept help, because it was very difficult for me to do that. So I would say I mean, when I was, working at a firm, I really felt like an outsider because I didn't come from the same type of background these folks at the firm did. And while they were all helpful to me, I didn't sort of want to expose my vulnerability in my past and where I came from because I felt it made me different and less than. So I just think as the flip side of it is to be willing to accept that help. And when I moved to Colorado, even though I had been practicing for, I don't know, 12 years or 13 years, I was trying to get the lay of the land. And I was, a member of the Colorado Trial Lawyers Association. And there was one guy that would post things all the time. And I was like, man, I need to meet this guy. But I didn't want to send him an email. I mean, today I probably would, but back then I didn't. So what I did was whenever I saw him at a CLE or something, I would sort of stalk him. And then eventually, and I would say, hey, I went up to him, and it was very unusual for me to do this, really outside of my comfort zone. And I said, hey, we should get lunch sometime. And he says, yeah, that would be great. I'd love to do that. And I didn't follow up. But the next time I saw him, I said, hey, we should get lunch. And I actually did. And today I probably talk to him 2 or 3 times a week. He's close to retiring. He's referred me a ton of cases. But more so like we're friends, and I gain a lot from that relationship. So I think that to be a mentee, it doesn't have to be sort of an official sort of title, but it can be sort of developing those types of relationships and making yourself vulnerable and open to those folks that maybe have some more experience that can help you out. And the thing is, it's not always going to fit, right? Like Amanda said, it could not always fit. But there's 8 billion people in the world, and I don't know how many lawyers, maybe 7 billion lawyers, I don't know. But you can find somebody that's going to fit and somebody you're going to mesh with, and that is going to be invaluable to you, not just for your career and professional development, but your personal development too. And somebody you can call up and say, "Man, this guy's beating me up, and I just, I feel like I don't know what to do." And I have a very good friend of mine who's the same age as me, and I had lunch where I was getting beaten up in a case, and it was just one of those days. And I had lunch with him, and I said, "I don't know if I can do this, right?" And he says, "I get it, man, I get it." And but take a step back, take a breath, and it was just that's what I needed. You know what I mean? And I needed that, and so we're all human, and we're not RoboCops or something like that, and we need that support. So be willing to sort of accept it and seek it out and sort of be vulnerable.
So Amanda, you touched on this. How did being a first generation attorney affect your experience in law school, for instance, like understanding the legal culture, was something that you mentioned, affect your practice where you are now? And um,
Yeah. So in law school, it was, a whole lot of trying to figure out what it was I was going to do as an attorney. So I latched onto this brochure that had all the different clinics because I was like, hey, this explains like different paths that attorneys can take. I had no idea what transactional law was before reading that packet. Like I probably intuited that it existed, but had never really thought about it. So I was like, that is what I need to do. And then of course I was trying to path my way through it, but without a lot of like dialogue with anybody else. It happened to work out for me, but a smarter way to do that would have been to talk to a whole bunch of people and get a lot of input. But like Marty said, I very much had that same issue of like, I didn't want to show how much I didn't know because I didn't want people to think that I was less than. Um, if I did it over again, I would do it completely differently. I had a great experience in law school, but it could have been more enriching if I had done those things. So I would just double down on Marty's advice to ask questions, even if you think it's going to make you look weird, and talk to people and engage with people, even if you're nervous about talking to them. But as far as in my practice, being a first generation attorney has kind of played out in different ways in different roles I've been in. So I've worked for a few different companies in-house, and one I was actually in a contracts role, not an attorney role. It was when I was pretty early out of law school. It was like 1 year out. And it was a biotech firm in California. They had 300 attorneys. So very large department. And I was interfacing with them all the time on different things that I was working on with them. And I was talking to one of them. I was like, hey, like I'm getting my licensure in California. I was already Colorado licensed. And I was like, so once I get that, what's the best way to go about flipping over to the legal side here? And he looks at me and he goes, where'd you go to school? And I said, CU. And he goes, oh no, no, we only hire from Harvard and Princeton and Yale. And it was just like this feeling of, because many Ivy League attorneys kind of are those generational attorneys. So you just got that feeling of like, oh, okay, I don't belong in this room. Sounds good, thank you. But then contrast that with the next role that I ended up in back here in Denver was with a company where it was, of course, in-house. Of the 12 people, only one was more than a first generation attorney. And so that culture was very different. People were very, not pretentious, I guess is the way to say it. But on day one, my boss was like, hey, just before you even think about this, we don't hang our licenses or diplomas on the wall. So don't go get them framed, don't hang them up. We don't want to make the business think that we're, snobby or stuck on ourselves. And so I think a lot of that culture may have been tied into, like at least it was a part of it, that they were first generation attorneys, right? They're not like this pedigreed person who's got to show their family tree on the wall, basically.
Sophia?
Sorry, I forgot the question.
How did being a first generation attorney affect your experience in law school, in starting out, for instance, understanding the legal culture?
Well, I think it's pretty much the same as both Amanda and Marty as far as like I had no idea. I just remember just feeling completely like lost and seeing the legacy people just automatically know how it worked. And feeling like I was just missing the boat on everything. I will say, it made me definitely work really hard. And like I have to work even harder to like prove myself and make sure I'm like, oh, at a disadvantage already. So I've got to really make sure I'm, up there. But also I was older when I went back to law school. And so I will say, I don't know if it was my age versus just first generation, but it made me really appreciate law school. And like I'm not messing around. Like it was my full-time job. And so, I took it very seriously. And maybe that was also part of being first generation. But yeah, I just definitely felt like everybody knows what's going on but me. It was very intimidating. And
Yeah.
feeling, just working too, just again, I went to a firm my first year out of law school. Um and that wasn't fun at all. That's all I'll say.
Marty, I
Yeah,
think we'll
just
pitch it over to, go ahead,
I
Amanda.
was gonna say just really quickly, Sophia, when you say like feeling very out of your league just culturally at law school, I remember like in orientation, the professors were making references to like, oh, like our culture is not like, what your families have seen at this and this and this place. Like we're different. And I remember being like, wait, there's like a known culture. What is that known culture? Could we talk about that before we talk about how we're different? Because I don't even know what we're talking about.
Marty?
Um, can you repeat sort of the question?
Maybe this isn't the best question. Everybody's forgetting it. How does being a first generation attorney affect your experience in law school starting out, understanding the legal culture?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that if you're going to, take a trip from, which I will later this week, from Florida to Denver, you can get a road map, or you can look at your Google Maps and it'll tell you the where to go and where you can stay, put it in Chat GPT. But I noticed once I got into law school and even into working for firms, there was no roadmap for me. And I sort of had to white knuckle it and figure it out. Um, so, and I think that I eventually came to where I want to be today. I'm glad I'm here where I am today. Maybe it took a little bit longer to sort of get here. But I went through the experience that I went through. I think I needed to go through that. Um, and, but I sort of feel like I was somebody I wasn't in the beginning, because I felt like I needed to fit in and be a certain image and litigate a certain way, which wasn't true to myself. And I do notice after I've been practicing for 5 or 6 years, I mean, I was thinking of quitting, because I was like, this isn't me, until I had my first jury trial. And I'm like, you know what? I was going to quit my job and quit the legal profession. So I had my first jury trial like 5 or 6 years in. And I said, the hell with it. I'm just going to be myself. I don't care because I'm going to leave anyways. And I won that trial. And 6 months later, one of my clients um, called me, who I was defending, and it was a slip and fall case, who I was defending in that case. And he says, "You're not going to believe this." He goes, "I was in a charity golf tournament and I sat next to the foreman of the jury trial that we were in." I said, "Oh, wow." And he said, "We really liked your lawyer. He was really down to earth and he was funny and he made it interesting. And he wasn't like the other lawyer who's from one of these white shoe firms, who quoted Voltaire in his opening. I didn't really even know who Voltaire was." And I was like, oh, like that paid off for me for being myself, and all of this experience that got me to where I am today. This is what I could sort of embrace and be myself. And I do that to this day. And I've just embraced it more and more and more. And to the extent where, um, you know, if you want somebody to, um, be some really aggressive bulldog asshole lawyer, like that's not me. That's not how I litigate. And I'm more than happy to tell a client, that's not me. This is what you get with me. And this is how I think this is the path to winning it or settling it. And I've just become more comfortable with that. And I think I guess we're going to talk about superpowers later on, but that's part of it. That's part of the superpower is, as first generation lawyers, we come from a different background and a different experience. And guess what? Like the people on juries, those are the people, most of those people come from that same way. That's what we relate to. Those first generation entrepreneurs, who are they going to relate to, right? They're going to relate to those other first generation lawyers who we have a common shared experience. So I think it's incredibly important, and and we should embrace it and celebrate
Perfect.
it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Marty, I cut you off. Yeah, no, that's exactly where I wanted to go next. So what are your superpowers as first generation attorneys?
Yeah, so I think that's my superpower, right? My superpower is, um, I is common sense, and I think good judgment, and it's being able to communicate things in a non sort of legal confusing way. um, and I have run across other lawyers. I don't know what their background is, but we all do, who will say, okay, this is sort of the legal approach, do this, and that, without any sort of appreciation of, does that make any sense? You know what I mean? And I have people that, call me, every week, and they say, okay, I want to launch this litigation. And I says, listen, we can do that. Does that make any sense to do that? And I bring that to it, right? And I bring that sort of real world experience. I worked in sales. I sort of have a background where I didn't grow up with, my mother and father coming home every night and, talking about the rule against perpetuities, right? So I think that's a superpower. And I think that's sorely needed in the legal profession.
Yeah, I would agree that being a chameleon is very much a superpower that first generation attorneys just kind of have naturally. We are from different backgrounds. We can relate to and have been forced to relate to a whole bunch of different groups of people, right? Those that we were raised around, and then in law school, a very different crowd, and then in law firms or other jobs, it's a very different crowd. And so that ability to adapt to the room, like to read the room and to speak to it in the way that it should be spoken to is very much a superpower. And I can see very much how that would translate in the jury setting. It is really impactful in-house too. So, whereas in a firm, you're, writing memos for other attorneys or for the attorneys for your clients, when you're in-house, you're dealing with a business team day in and day out. And it's a pretty, widely known thing now that in-house attorneys are expected not to be stuffy and issuing formal memos that are very abstract. Like businesses want down to earth, real time, not memo, just an email. What is the point? What is the risk? What should we do? Right? They want you to be a business partner and a legal partner. And so if you can't talk to them like a human being, if you're stuck talking about the rule against perpetuities or the absolute, black and white part of the law, or just getting into the nuance of what the gray area is without being able to assess the risk, there's not a lot of value on the in-house side. And so having a background where you can relate to other people and you know how important it is to be able to match their cadence and their tone is a really big superpower.
Completely agree with what Amanda just said. I think, I had written down empathy and having different perspectives, and being able to communicate, and um, conflict resolution is so important. Conflict isn't always a negative thing, and so I think being able to uh, you know read other people, and take in different perspectives, which is something that we're all able to do because we lived it, um, is a superpower. And I think something, we kind of prepped a little bit before this, but Marty had brought up before, strengths. I think, the things that we've gone through as first generation, to get to law school, get through law school, have our jobs as first generation attorneys. We're very resilient. And sometimes, we're faced with certain situations. We've built up that resilience and strength, that, and not to say that others haven't gone through other things as well, but I think that's one of our superpowers as well.
So what do you think, what benefits can you offer? Let me go back up on that. How do you see your clients and the people that you work with perceiving you as a first generation attorney? And then what do you have to offer them as a first generation attorney that may or may not be part of someone else's bag of tools from a more traditional background?
I'll jump in real quick and I'll say, I think authenticity. I think, as Amanda and Marty had mentioned, we can relate to people very well, and I think, communicate very well, see their perspectives. We can empathize, when we need to. I'm just thinking, like, from my perspective in my role in dealing with like my types of clients. I think we're not stuffy. We're not pretentious. And kind of like Marty said, when he was down to earth, that is what worked for him. And I think if they do want a different type of attorney, um, then they're going to go somewhere else. That's what I think we offer.
Yeah, I struggle a little bit to say that only first generation attorneys can have some specific benefit for their clients. That doesn't sit quite right with me. I think that the superpowers we talked about are real advantages that we can have. But I also think that anyone from any background can develop those same things. We just come a little bit more with it built in, which is an advantage that we have. So as far as like benefits to our clients, I do think that, the natural tendency to work really hard to compensate for our backgrounds is an advantage. And one that, translates into maybe more hours worked than we should be working. Maybe going too far to prove our value to a company, right? But it is very much that resilience and that work ethic.
Yeah, and I think you would be surprised at the the clients that are sort of high level clients that really want that, and I've been hired by some, I guess, high level wealthy clients for cases that have gone through with these other law firms, these sort of white shoe law firms, and they don't like that, and they're tired of that. They're tired of getting the billing and the runaround and the BS, and it's sort of like a breath of fresh air. And so there are those clients out there that have sort of run their course through these big law firms and these storied legal career people, and they don't want that. And so there's a place for lawyers and first generation lawyers to use those strengths and superpowers to serve those clients, because I mean the legal landscape is changing anyways, right? It's just like people want something different, and they don't want just a $20,000 bill at the end of the month and a bunch of legalese. Like they want some real they want some empathy and understanding, and they want some common sense, and they just don't want a bunch of BS. And I think Amanda really sort of nails it on the head with, that's not something exclusive to first generation lawyers, but we're better prepared for it because of where we come from in our background.
So there's a comment in the chat to everyone. Absolutely agree with what all of you said about your superpower. I'm a first generation lawyer and English is not my first language. As an in-house counsel, I find that my superpower is the ability to translate complicated legal concepts to other people within my organization. Nobody wants to read a memo full of legalese.
Yeah, that's true.
So how I'm torn because I want to get to the end. Let's do that. And then I'll circle back with other questions if we still have time. What advice would you give people that are starting out, first generation attorneys? Oh, and I forgot to mention, if you could put in the chat, how long have you been in practice? I was supposed to do that at the beginning.
Yeah, so I'll jump in first on this one. So advice for first generation attorneys, it's stuff we've already talked about, right? Seek out mentors, even if you find them intimidating and don't know what to ask them. You can ask the question, what should I be asking you? Like,
Yeah.
what do I not even know to ask about that you can tell me about to help me?
Um, I think that I would it's reaching out, it's putting yourself in sort of a vulnerable position, not being too hard on yourself. I mean, it's you should certainly have the dog grace towards other people, but grace towards yourself as well, and to understand you're not going to be perfect. You're going to make mistakes. The thing that had scared me the most was losing my first jury trial until it happened, and it wasn't that bad. And so I just think it's reaching out to other people, being vulnerable, being authentic. There's a lot of these sort of CLEs that I went to as a younger attorney, and the presenter would say, if you have any questions or anything, just reach out to me. And I always thought to myself, they don't really mean that, right? And I really mean it. So I want to tell everybody who is watching this, you can put in Google Champagne Law Firm Denver. My info will come up, and just shoot me an email. I'd love to have coffee with you or answer any question. And reach out to people, and I think just know that you belong, and that your experience and your background is invaluable, um, and to embrace it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Amanda and Marty have already said. I like to tell people to be curious. Always be curious. So even and especially in situations where you might feel there may be a conflict, or you're not understanding where someone's coming from. There's a misunderstanding. Um, you don't know where other people are coming from, what kind of day they've had, whatever it is. And so I always tell people to like be curious, ask questions. I always try to approach things from um, I'm not quite understanding what that means. Can you help me understand what's going on in the situation? And I feel like if you're curious about understanding something, it lessens the tensions, it lessens someone being offended or on the defense. And it just allows you to learn more about the situation or the whatever's going on. And so I think you can take that into any situation. So, like a mentorship, um, you know, whatever it is that you're wanting to learn about, and that just helps you discover something that you didn't know before. Um, and so I think you can just relate that to anything. And same goes for me too. I try to be a resource in my job for anybody. If anyone ever has a question about guardianship, like the purpose why I'm here is to help Colorado and the people that I serve, but also just educate people. So that's part of my advice is to be a resource, to be a servant to others in however you can. And so I'll put my contact in the chat. If you would like, I can't guarantee I'm the best mentor out there, but if you ever need help or have a question, you can reach out to me, and if I'm not the person for you, I can try and help find the answers for you.
So the three of you have graciously, oh, Amanda, did I cut you off? No.
No, you're good, but I did want to say, like, I'm also open to having coffee or, a virtual meeting anytime with anyone. So I'll put my info in chat as well.
So you consistently, the three of you have talked about giving back, and how do you see your personal growth tied into being a first generation attorney, and how it's played out in your career and your trajectory?
I'm sorry. Can you say it one more time?
How you've talked about giving
Oh,
back and how, yeah, go ahead.
Um, I just don't think you can have one without the other. I think that the personal growth. I mean, because most people become lawyers when they're younger. It's not something you pick up when you're 50 or 60 generally, right? So you're sort of in your formative years as an adult. Um, so I don't know. I think things have gone in parallel with my professional development and my personal development. And that, once I became sort of more comfortable with who I am and what my background was, and not to be ashamed of it, but to embrace it and say, this is me, this is who I am. If you go to my website, it tells you this story. You know what I mean? So it's out there. There was an article in the I think the Denver Bar. I'm the chair of the Metro Volunteer Lawyers. Like they did an article about my background, and I said some pretty sensitive, not sensitive, but some pretty um, personal things about my background, about growing up with a single mom and a dad that didn't support us. And then it's funny, my dad read it and he says, "Well, I didn't know your childhood was so tough." I was like, "Well, that was sort of the point." It's the point of the article. So it's just to be. I've lost my train of thought. I don't remember what we were talking about.
We were talking about empathy and your career. Yeah.
Oh, the profession. Yeah. So I think personal development is really important because it'll help you develop the confidence to be who you are, to embrace that. And, and the more you come to that realization in your personal life and you've come to terms with that, that really is going to be extraordinarily helpful in your professional life, So that's what I think.
Yeah, I'm just gonna keep parroting Marty. I should just say like what he said is what I'm gonna say. But I would say that, you know, again, personal growth is important because not only like are you learning how to be a professional and needing mentorship early, you then become the boss and you are mentoring the people below you, not just the mentees that you might pick up through different mentoring programs, but your own employees. And so I am constantly reading books. I'm constantly going to seminars about how to be a good leader in general, not just a good attorney. So I think that's really important. And then, as far as how has giving back, kind of shaped my career and my life in general. So my relationships with mentees, and I typically have 1 to 2 per year, every year, has given me the ability to feel like I'm contributing to the next generation of attorneys, which is really important to me. And it also makes me continue to self-reflect on what is important and what things matter to the next generation of counsel. And so I think that, just continuing to keep that top of mind, whether it's for your own personal development or to give back to others, is really important.
Yes, completely agree. And I think, yeah, I mean, they just kind of go together, right? And definitely, um, leadership plays a role, as far as professional growth. I have done like professional coaching, when it comes to, developing like leadership skills in my role, which, had to also include some of that personal, growth, right? Because that is just, I'm human, right? So that's going to play into it. Um, my, I'm, I feel like my, um, it's just me. So like my personal is just giving back. It's just the way I'm built. And so um my professional i- is my personal, which is just advocating and protecting. And so I feel lucky that my professional role gets to uh my personal gets to feed into, I guess I would say, my professional role, and vice versa, which ha because of that, though, I have to set really firm boundaries, which is something to think about. Advice, which it doesn't matter, if your personal kind of tends to bleed into your professional. I would say, as a professional and you're working hard, long hours, and all of those things. I think Amanda had mentioned, we might work extra long hours, proving ourselves and those types of things. Please remember boundaries, and take care of yourself. But I think, um, you know, I think it just makes you feel good too, right? To give back, feel like you're doing your part, for others. And whether that's in a professional way or even on a personal level, I think, it's important. I'm not sure if I answered your question, but there you go.
Yeah, and I think that, like, for instance, like my personal growth, um, when I came to terms with that I wasn't perfect and that I was going to make mistakes and it was going to be okay when I made those mistakes, that led me to um, professional growth, because I would go out there, maybe take some more chances and risk, and maybe make some arguments or a presentation to a jury that was that I felt a little bit not I felt was risky. And I'm not saying risky in sort of a malpractice way, but in terms of creative in a different type of way. So that personal growth about allowing myself to make mistakes and having grace with myself if I do make mistakes has led me to become more creative in my practice, and which has made me a better lawyer. And it's also made me a more fulfilled lawyer to enjoy what I'm doing. So I think that's probably an example from my life where I think that one goes with the other.
Awesome. So one final question. What contribution do you think first generations make to the legal profession?
I would say perspective. Like I know we talked about before, right? Like we all have different perspectives than those who aren't first generation. And that perspective feeds a lot of the things that we've discussed on the call today.
Yeah, so I think I think definitely perspective. I also we also have to think that most of the people we serve aren't lawyers. And so if we have first generation lawyers who are coming from a background of not being raised by lawyers or in that environment, and most of our clients are people who aren't lawyers either, boy, that seems like a pretty good match. And it's kind of funny that it's taken so long for a CLE to kind of bubble up and say, "Hey, this is important. This is a superpower." I really wish, like when I was in law school, I really wish there was a program like this. I really wish that I saw that there was something like that, so I wouldn't feel so sort of alone, you know. And so I really hand it to you, Rebecca, for sort of recognizing this and putting it together.
Thanks, Marty.
When I thought about this question earlier, I wrote down collaboration and inclusiveness.
Can you say more about that?
um,
No.
no, that's it. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay.
I don't know. Again, with all the things that we've talked about, I just think like maybe because of maybe feeling like outsiders and, you know, we didn't know the process and, you know, felt like we didn't belong, that maybe, you know, we can bring the flip side of that to the legal profession, which is we don't want others to feel that way, right? So we can maybe be intentional about bringing others in and, you know, wanting to collaborate and wanting to bring inclusiveness to the legal profession.
Awesome. All right. Well, we have, real quick, just one word. What are you most grateful for being a first generation attorney?
Um, I I'm most grateful for the ability to do it. So one time I was suspended from the practice of law, but listen to this. It was because I forgot to take a CLE. Okay, so I got it in the mail, and I was working for this really crappy law firm, and I didn't get the other one. And so I got this thing in the mail, says you're suspended from practice of law. I was like, oh my god, I was practicing on the floor. Like, what am I gonna do? Like, I don't know what to do. I don't. And I had just made a call. And they put me back on. Not a big deal. But I just thought to myself, um, it's just such a privilege to do this. You know what I mean? And especially, and I'm just more appreciative of it and cognizant of it because of my background. It wasn't handed to me. It certainly wasn't a foregone conclusion that I would be here. So it's a privilege, and it's a privilege to serve our clients and the core system. Is an absolute privilege.
Yeah, I can't think of anything else to add to that. I agree. I am reminded a lot of times by my family about what a privilege it is. You know, you can kind of get numb to it when you're doing it all day long, every day. But I just had to get licensed in Texas because my new client is in Texas. And they're one of the two states in the country that doesn't do in-house licensure. That's a whole different topic. But, you know, getting that new license, my family's like, we got to celebrate you. And I was like, do we? Like, that seems unnecessary. This is my third one. They're like, no, this is a huge deal. And I was like, okay, yeah, it is a privilege. It is a big deal. And yeah, you're right. It's a profession that we all get to be part of, and we didn't have to be born into it. So
Yeah.
that's a big deal.
Yeah, I think mine, I mean, one, it opens a lot of doors, right? Having a JD professionally. But I think mine is I'm glad that I could make my dad proud, and I should have listened to him earlier and and gone into law school a lot sooner. Although I think I wouldn't have appreciated it as much if I hadn't kind of gone the roundabout way.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, panelists, for your vulnerability, for sharing your experiences, and really lighting the way for so many. And thank you, attendees, for joining us. Our next event will be June 25th from 12 to 1, Understanding the Business of Law. Registration can be found on our website, and we look forward to seeing you then. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.